Okay, welcome. This is our Cannabis for Wellness panel. We're going to be discussing alternative delivery methods, different ways of using this plant in a way that is for maintaining and regulating wellness, and with emphasis on non-intoxication, or ways for using this plant as a health aid, for self-care, and in a way as a preventative. If we can prevent stress and inflammation, a lot of disease is associated with stress and inflammation. And so let us give the mic over to our panelists and just give us a brief introduction about yourself and your work in this space.
All right, my name's Paula Walter. I'm the founder of Kind Medicine. We do Kind Caps, Kind Rub. We've been in the county We've been in the county about 10 years. We do whole plant medicine. We provide medicine to dispensaries, and wink, wink, honk, honk. We used to provide medicine to 500 individuals.
Nice.
Having been in the game since the lab called me to tell me that I had the first CBD pill and I didn't know what it was at all. So it's been a very interesting adventure coming to here. Where Jeff will share, he has many different varieties of CBD, and different medicine making. We're both medicine makers, but it's very exciting to be at a panel like this. Having been a branded company for 10 years, we're now looking at a change in the industry. At the end of the year, it's very likely that the products that you're used to will be off the shelves. So I do believe it's important that you learn to make your own medicine. And as Albert shared with me, he is a medicine maker as well. And I think it's important we go back to the old ways. Our grandmothers knew how to make this medicine. And I think it's really important that we spread that. So even though I'm a branded product, I'm actually looking to sell my company so that I can only provide medicine free of charge and teach you how to make it without going to jail or losing my license.
Wow.
So that's where I'm at.
Good for you.
Beautiful.
So thank you.
Good for you.
My name is Jeff Nordahl, and I run a company, I guess, Jade Nectar, and we also had a collective for the last a little over a year here in Santa Cruz as well, that's now extinct for the time being due to Prop 64. Unfortunately, we're not allowed as a collective now to distribute directly to our patients. But during that time, it was very exciting to work with all these formulations where we're very strictly whole plant formulas. Most of them, the exciting thing that we're delving into is the raw cannabinoids, THCA, CBDA. We've now been playing around with THCVA, which is very exciting. And yeah, we've really found that in the raw form, that tends to be, the raw forms are for wellness, and then if you, for recreating, you just heat them up and they have a whole different set of properties. CBD being the exception, decarboxylated or heated CBD still is non-psychoactive, but it's amazing. From the exact same plant, you'll take the exact same flower, and if you heat it into a decarboxylated form, it has one set of properties and treats a certain set of ailments, or gives people who consume it a certain effect. But that exact same plant, when you keep it totally raw and infuse that into olive oil, which is what we usually work with, it will have a whole different, unique set of properties in people's bodies that treat or address completely different ailments or whatever the person's trying to address. So anyway, that's what we've been working on, and we're still now strictly going through dispensaries because that's the only thing the state allows us, and as you said as well, those
Wink, wink, honk, honk.
yeah, because what that means for certain people who were, cannabis was not a luxury item, it was something these folks were depending on for their relief, and all of a sudden, and not to demonize dispensaries, because they've got to stay in business, they got to pay bills, and a lot of it is also the tax
keep
burden.
the law.
Yeah, but for example, a $15 bottle formula. So that used to cost $15 when go direct to the collective patients. Now that same exact bottle is about $40 through a dispensary. And again, that's not the dispensary's fault. That's just the structure that we have right now. So, yeah, I'll just say it's hard to hear some of those people who can no longer afford their medicine, and when they reach out,
Yeah.
there's the law, and then there's
The spirit of it.
ethics,
The right thing
the
to do.
ethics,
Yeah.
and the philosophy, and the reason we all got into this. So I'll just leave it at that.
It's beautiful. No, and I'm kind of seeing a new direction as we discuss, because this is almost like, how do we preserve the medical piece of the cannabis community now that post-medical, right? Post Prop 64, in a way, it's even written, there's a sunset of January 9th, 2019. Technically, it's over. The dream of, Dennis, rest in peace, rest in power, his memorial, Dennis Perone, helped draft and pass Prop 215, which is what all of this was built on, right? It was built on sick AIDS patients in the 80s and the 90s. And now we have Mike Tyson's Tyson Ranch, right? It's an entrepreneurial, what they're calling a green rush. And so how do we, and we could just kind of, philosophically open a dialogue here around preserve the ethics of the medical movement in this modern era.
I'd love to speak.
Please.
I've been in Sacramento. I've been with Lori Ajax, which is the head of the Cannabis
This
Bureau.
one might be a little better.
Yeah.
I've been in Sacramento at the Compassion sessions with the Bureau of Cannabis Control. Last Friday, I met the director of the Bureau of Cannabis Control, the head of cultivation, the head of manufacturing, and the head of health and safety. So I'm being proactive on this. I think the only thing we can do is to fight in the streets. I feel crazy inside, honestly. I never came to this to make money. I've had a job, yes, and my patients, my kids that work for me, they get paid well because we live in Santa Cruz and it's expensive. And at the end of the day, we break even. Last year, we made $1 million. We gave $250,000 of medicine away for free, and we broke exactly even.
Wow.
And that's all I thought we were ever supposed to do. And now it's a whole new game. And I was just told about Jeff that he makes his money in another thing, and he only wants to do this for love. And it's just amazing. And we've got to continue. It's people like this in the room that are going to keep this going, because the BCC doesn't care. They don't even like cannabis. They laughed at the meeting about all of us registering and it being free. So now they all know where we live. They know my house. They know your house. They know anybody that's in the industry that wants to stay in it. They know exactly where we are. So the thing to keep this medical and the integrity in this is, one, to teach everyone we know how to use this plant in every form, whether you heat it or not. There's lots of different things you can do with this. There's lots of different books out there. There's lots of YouTube videos, and I recommend everyone trying their own way. And I'm sorry it does cost that much in the dispensary. It's really hard to have people call me and say, I couldn't afford it last week, and I certainly can't afford it next week. But I'm proud to say that no one has ever came to us and we've ever charged individually $1. And I ask that you join me in that. So I challenge each and every one of you to pass it on if it was your mother ill, and whatever skills you have. And we also have a free clinic in Felton now. It's Michael Tierras. He's a local herbalist, and it is a free clinic that is primarily other herbs. Cannabis isn't used, although they are allowing me to do some CBD work. But in whatever we can do in ourselves to send letters to our legislators, let our county know how important this is. Most of our farmers, these young men that were up here, that are breeders that deserve to have a place, Jason fought and stopped the ban in Santa Cruz for the growers. And that young man is out of the game. It's so wrong. Pat Malo, that was his partner in helping stop this, he's also out of the game. 2 young breeders that have done nothing but to help individual patients in our community have no chance to get into the market. I have to sell. I have no choice. I either get high investors to go forward. If what I've been doing for 10 years, I'm going to need $250,000. Well, you heard my marketing program. They don't like me when the investors hear my plan of give it all away and not make any money. That's not what they want to hear. So I'm having to make a choice. I'm now talking publicly that I am making a choice to sell my company so that I can continue and fight this. Because I can't fight it as a company. We have no rights. They will take our companies away. But as an individual, I can stand in the dirt and I can teach each one of you individually how to make medicine to save your own life. So take me up on that.
Nice. Here, use this one, Jeff. I'll take that old cord.
Yeah, and that's what's exciting. The thing is that there's other currencies and paybacks beyond financially with money. And how I got into cannabis was, so I had my fun with cannabis and psychedelics and everything when I was in my teens and early 20s, but then somehow got into computers and doing that stuff. And then in my mid 30s, I had been invincible and surfing and doing yoga and just very active. And long story short, I ended up getting Lyme disease. In a pretty bad case of it, and going all the different conventional routes, such, nothing seemed to help, and pretty much I was coming to the conclusion that I was just going to be sort of this basket case that would limp through the rest of my life. So have been there in those hopeless, helpless health situations where no one can offer any relief. And then thankfully we have some hippy dippy doctors here in Santa Cruz, and I finally saw one of them, and he recommended trying cannabis. I hadn't touched it for 12 years. And immediately, once I started consuming cannabis, I could feel a shift in my body that was positive. And then just fast forward a little bit, became fascinated with cannabis, and actually started going to, also at the same time, it sounds silly, but I started going to these Grateful Dead dances that happen at the 418. And something about cannabis and those slightly psychedelic experiences with all the medicinal qualities of what's going on with cannabis, it was like a shamanistic healing experience that just sort of rebooted my system and gave my system the ability to start healing itself. So, and always having a fascination with plants and such, and this was around 2012. So the coast seemed to be clear as far as the legality issues. So I decided to start a small garden, and it was great. It was an outdoor garden, just loved that process, and then started actually eating the cannabis leaves while gardening. Started to realize that I really enjoyed the sensation that would happen when I'd eat the leaves raw. So that's where I really got turned on to the whole raw cannabinoid thing, but then also experiencing the plant as a whole food. And in reality, it really is a green, leafy, highly nutritious vegetable, just like kale or chard. It has just as much nutrition, but then it has these cannabinoids on top of that. And when consumed in that way, it just kind of gives you that after yoga, after a massage, after meditation, just sort of grounding. And especially for people dealing with lots of inflammation or stress and such, it just relaxes everything, and you just feel very present and grounded without the distraction of psychoactive stuff. And I also have, right now, my daughter's 9 years old, but when I was first getting into cannabis, my daughter was very young, so it just was extremely inappropriate to be stoned all day long in that situation. So anyway, raw seems to be very appropriate for a lot of people who just need relief, but don't want to be psychoactive.
Can I
Yeah.
make a comment about tolerances?
Yeah.
Because I do, you're talking about the psychotropic effect of heating the cannabis, but I found that the full spectrum, and I take, I manufacture my own oil, but I found that the tolerance levels at 1,000 milligrams a day of the oil, they dissipate. I no longer have slurred speech, although slightly. If I put my dentures in, I really start slurring. But I can think square, and I can deal with the people around me in a loving, honest way. It's not about being stoned or being, excuse my vernacular, but effed up.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going for that. I did 32 years without a toke.
Yeah.
And when I came down with pancreatic cancer, somebody said, try this, and they were sober for a long time. And I said, well, at least I'll go out happy. And that was 4 years ago, and I'm still here. I
Yeah.
stopped taking it, my cancer came back. I'm back on it again. And
Yeah.
I'm here to tell you that the tolerance levels change. That's the
It
point I want to
definitely,
make.
and some people's bodies are different and react to it differently as well.
Okay, because I heat my oil to extract it.
Yeah.
So I decarboxylize it in that way.
Exactly.
And one thing that's exciting also about raw is in some ways that can be an entry level or like the bunny slopes
Yeah.
for people who are totally new to cannabis.
Yeah.
It's really a lost opportunity where a lot of people, read an article about cannabis and how it could help their particular ailment. They wander into a dispensary or something and pick up a brownie and then go home and just completely
The
blow
black
their
mamba
mind.
at 500 milligrams.
Yeah,
put me
and then
under
they're
when I was
so
thinking.
traumatized by it, they just hit right off cannabis for the rest of their lives and just say, that is absolutely not for me, I'm never touching it again.
I started
And
with
that was a
rice,
loss.
with a rice grain size under my tongue. I didn't start with a
Yeah.
gram. Okay, first
Yeah.
off.
I'd like to address the brownie.
Okay,
The brownie is really what's going to kill you. The sugar in the brownie is going to speed up your
the
cancer.
sugar. Yeah.
You really want to be careful of that. That's the reason that we do whole plant medicine. The reason that we use only organic ingredients, being organic cannabis, olive oil, coconut oil, rosemary, essential oils, whatever it is we use it organically. All of our patients are going to, we're all autoimmune problems, cancer, inflammation, fibromyalgia, Lyme disease through herbalists and cultivators are rampant because you're out in the plants getting bit by ticks. But it's really important the integrity of that plant. Now, some people like the activated cannabis and some don't. But with CBD, you do need some THC to go along with it. We make varieties that are, I have 30 to 1, 25 to 1. We can go any way, 30 to 1 to 1 to 30. But you do need to activate it with some THC, which you're going to microdose, hopefully, up to you finding your own dose. As Albert said, he's at 1,000 milligrams or 2,000 milligrams.
Well, during the chemo, actually, during the 5 days where I'm ingesting the poison, I take two 1 gram tablets that I manufacture.
I can understand that.
Yeah, and
I have to say I have a little different opinion. I really do feel that it's better throughout the body to give high doses of cannabis throughout the day instead of just one dose that goes through your body. I'd love to talk to you further
you
later.
bet. I'm here to talk. That's-
I've never sold to any cancer patients because I always wanted to say if it didn't work, you didn't pay for it. And I really find myself that an olive oil or coconut oil dosed out properly from a lab, so you know what your dose is, and we can talk about microdosing on your own shortly. But I think it's really important that we use it throughout the day. It's not about getting high, but it is about getting well. And that I don't find a stigma with THC. I really don't. I do believe there's different uses for THC and different uses for CBD. If you take too much THC, take some CBD, it'll bring you down. That's one thing to know. Also, milk will help too.
Mangoes help put you up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Because of the
pretty
terps.
exciting.
Myrcene.
But I do, the breeders were talking about the terpenes, and I want to tell you a little story, and then I'll pass it off to Jeff. I recently, well, no, I didn't. Actually, I bought it last year because we couldn't have bought anything recently. I bought some cannabis that allegedly went through the fire. And I was able to buy cannabis at a very low rate. Now, it didn't look like it had been through the fire. It just had a slightly smoky smell. So I've always wondered why you would try one edible or one type of medicine. Neither of us are into the CO2 or the other type of extracts. We're both whole plant. So you'll understand this too. But when we tested the thing, before I send it to the lab, I do an internal test. And I have my people try it that work for me. And they all felt the pill. And we shoot for a 30 milligram pill. And everybody felt it was a 15 or lower. And I had everybody try it twice. Because it was full blood. And I mean, there was no reason this shouldn't have been a 40 or a 50. When I sent it to the lab, it was a 50. The problem was the terpenes were missing. The terpenes had been lost in the fire, even though you couldn't tell. And that's the reason why CO2 and some of those other things, you have to take twice as much or 3 times as much because it doesn't go.
Wow.
The bioavailability through your body is not the same. And the terpenes are really where it is. I'm not a scientist. I'm a witch. Be honest. I didn't start taking It's the truth.
Say it up.
Don't
I've
get
been
witchy
doing
on us
herb
here.
classes. I started going to the California School of Herbal Studies 5 years after I started my company. So when the government came to ask me why I'm doing this, I had a reason to say I have a certificate, or a few now.
Yeah.
But the truth is, it's in the terpenes, and we're missing out. So if you capture terpenes and you reintroduce them, you're still splitting the molecule. It's never going to be as strong. It's like if my leg was broke right here, and then you pull my leg, it's going to break right there again. It's never going to be as strong as it once was. And so my goal is that you're educated on what to take. If I was going to a dispensary with you and my product was not available, or if you had other reasons, you want CBD-A or you want play with the CBD-VA, we come across it on occasion, but I don't try to work on that. I would offer Jeff's medicine. But I would tell you, I can go to a dispensary and I can walk out and tell you there's not one thing in that dispensary I would eat or give a friend. And it's really important, the process. And I want to tell you, CO2 is pushed down your throat because it's cheap. You make 90% more money, and you can put mildew, mold, anything through the hopper, and something comes out at the end. The process, whole plant process, if it's not in the plant, you can't make it any better than what you start with. You have to have the very best to start to get the very best product. Where these other processes are more about money. So I just say, be an educated person, try for yourself, learn possibly how to make it yourself so you can avoid some of these fees. The hard part with that is there is no testing. We've tested every single batch since the labs came in. I've been a couple of years older than any of the labs. But once we had a lab, every single batch we test. Because I could never look you in the eye and tell you I didn't care enough to batch test that. So I'm glad with the laws, as Jason had talked, going forward. But I want to tell you, I batch test every 3 pounds. The law says every 50 pounds. So I want you to see what's really going on here. It's not the truth, it's kind of a scam. So the labs are going to start letting individual patients start testing their own. There's also some new tests coming out that people can test at home. So if you're into medicine making,
Color strips, right?
yeah, there's all kinds of different things going on. And there's another machine as well that's supposed to test for pesticides at home.
Oh, cool.
So I'd say educate yourself. There's a lot of good books out there, and if we can be of help,
Can I say something about terpenes? Yeah,
At 75 degrees, the most sensitive and delicate monoterpenes dissipate into the atmosphere. So it's heat, temperature, and light can really degrade your cannabis. So the fire whole bud you probably had was exposed to a lot of heat.
yes.
So once it goes above that 75 degree threshold, say there's flames adjacent to the grow, I mean, we're significantly hotter than what the plant is used to, so it lost a lot of those terpenoids. Terpenes are what give rose a rose smell, what give pine the pine smell. This flower, has the capacity to smell like almost any plant in the flora kingdom because of the genome is so diverse. without the terpenes, we don't have an entourage effect. The cannabinoid will hit the blood-brain barrier, and that's it. That's where it ends. The terpenes, if you're going to use like a sports analogy, in football, there's a lineman. The lineman makes a hole. The running back scores the touchdown. So your linemen are your terpenes that make the hole in the blood-brain barrier in order for the cannabinoid to access the cannabinoid receptor in the brain. And it's all over the body too. It's not just the brain. You have receptors everywhere. And so these are very, very important, and we're using terpenes in every meal. When you eat a salad, that's 200 milligrams of beta-caryophyllene. So terpenes are ubiquitous in our life, in our health, and that's what's so exciting about these raw whole plant approaches, is we're actually seizing and bridling the full potential that the plant provides.
Yeah.
I want to share with you.
Well, I wanted to mention as well. Is this still on?
Here you go.
Okay.
I don't know what's going
I
on
was
with
like,
that one.
just talking into a dead mic. So anyway, just wanted to mention as well that we also, our first sort of formula or product that we ventured into is actually cannabis juice, and technically we call it cannabis juice, but it's really a cannabis puree. And all we were doing is throwing heaps of leaves into a blender with some water and a tiny bit of banana. The banana would keep it homogeneous, so it wouldn't separate. And
Emulsified.
yeah,
That's the word.
And then we just pour that in ice trays and freeze that, and then we figured out how to package it in a nice, neat way that would be presentable at the dispensaries, as well as to all of our collective members. But if you haven't experienced that experience of just consuming the raw leaves, it's a completely unique experience that I still haven't found anything that quite is that same entourage of all the you're getting the chlorophyll, the fiber. I was concerned at that when we first started doing it, because a lot of people were interested. They were having stomach issues, so as far as like irritable bowel and what are some of the other Crohn's
Yeah.
and things.
Celiac.
And I was a little concerned that it might be a little too intense for those delicate digestive issues, but it turned out that those people really benefited from it, and so it seems that all through their digestive tracts it was actually addressing the inflammation issues. So that's very exciting. And then, but right now we don't have any of the juice available, and all that was doing by freezing it, we were just giving that fresh plant material a shelf life. And then people take the cubes and just throw them in a smoothie and blend it up and make a nice little cannabis smoothie every day. But right now we actually are all out of it because the state was going to ban all frozen or refrigerated cannabis items. That's what they were proposing during the summertime. So all of our collective members actually bought everything we had. We didn't plant more of those juice plants. I only have a handful of cuts of that exact plant because we thought we were done for the time being. But then the state surprised us in November. They released the emergency guidelines, and they wrote in a whole paragraph just for allowing cannabis juice, frozen cannabis juice, which is really cool. So they actually responded because all of our collective members wrote in to the state about that issue. So anyway, so we were talking.
Community organizing at its best.
The state is actually listening.
Yeah. You
At
mobilize
least
those letters.
on that issue, at least.
Yeah. On that issue.
But wanted to also alert everybody that what is going on now in the industry. So we've been talking whole plant. What's really happening now, and I keep running across this and people soliciting me these ideas, is there's things called CBD isolate and THC isolate, which
Looks like cocaine.
they're just stripped down the plant to the pure just getting those molecules. And to be quite honest, I haven't even looked into what the process is involved, but it is the furthest thing away from a whole plant. But it's cheap, and it's getting into just this processed food approach to doing cannabis medicine. So they make these giant batches of this crystalline powder that's CBD isolate, and then you can basically introduce that into any medium. You know, you can just pour that in water, coconut oil, brownies, you just sprinkle. So now you can, on your, you know, in your warehouse or processing plant, just have mountains of this powder. But I haven't even consumed it, but from what I've heard from other people, they just say it's just very sort of one-dimensional.
Yeah.
And
They've been soliciting with hemp CBD since they found CBD. They've been calling hundreds of people. Don't buy any of it.
so the isolate is cheap, but it just doesn't seem to be effective. And then it's and then there's other techniques, of course, that use petrochemicals to do extraction and such.
Yeah, hydrocarbons.
Yeah, and I've heard like I never quite understood it, but they said, you know, well, it gets rid of all the dirty parts of the plant, like the chlorophyll and these parts. I'm like,
Chlorophyll's a
that's the
superfood.
good stuff.
Yeah.
Why is that being considered garbage, or that you want to get rid of it?
I like the green medicine.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, like the quest is to get this clear, transparent substance that resembles nothing that came from a plant. So anyway, that's just, if people weren't aware, there's a lot of things now that say this is a CBD product, and quite often, if it's not green, definitely be skeptical. Anyway.
Key things are the terms I want you guys to walk away with is entourage effect. So when you see a white powder, there is no flavonoids, there are no terpenoids. There's this lack of the whole plant synergy that is achieved, and that the reality of our bodies is we have lock and key receptors for the phytocannabinoids, but also these terpenoids, because when we eat salad and an orange, when we spray the orange off of the rind, that's pure limonene. It's an essential oil. So, you know, as a kid, I used to squeeze a rind and light it with a match, and poof, right? Those are powerful esters and alcohols. And you know, when you isolate, it's such a Western medical perspective, is let's find something useful and isolate it and maybe synthetically reproduce it and patent it and make a ton of money. Well, the reality here is we're coming into a new age, and the consistent theme of our talks today are aligning our species with nature, and not dominating or controlling nature, but working with nature in such a way to balance our garden and the biology and the health of our land. But that also translates to our body and the biology in the, you know, in your gut flora, in your mind, you know, throughout your whole system, because our bodies aren't one isolated system. Each system is they all interact together, and they are interdependent. So is this whole plant medicine. Is each flavonoid, each cannabinoid, each terpenoid, you know, all of these esters, all of these alcohols, all of these sugars, all of these chlorophyll, they all have a role to play. So it'd be so narrow-sighted to omit all of this potential. That's the beauty of this whole plant approach.
Yeah. I was just going to say, it is kind of silly that we're taking this plant that's evolved for how many thousands of years, and now that we have access to it, that we're going to improve this plant with our machines.
I'd like to share one more thing, if not interrupted. I was at the VA last week, 3 weeks ago, my first over at Stanford. They had on the medication list available THC synthetic 25 milligram in tablets for the first time. And it's a federal property. But they told me I couldn't have my medicine there. to take because I was in the hospital for 5 days, 5 days, something.
3.
Anyway,
Felt like 5.
They gave you
so I had
Marinol?
it with me. I had my pills with me, and I told them, "Don't ask, don't tell," because I'm taking it, you know, because I'm fighting the cancer. You can't stop me. And they just walked away, you know. But it's
Just
in my
say
records.
spirulina.
It's in my records for the first time over there. So, God willing.
Actually, we had Stanford doctors call us up to bring suppositories to a patient that was in the
Right.
hospital. So they're actually getting into it.
But with the VA, up until a month ago,
Oh, VA.
they
Yeah,
had federal
Yeah,
property,
right.
and these guys would lose their research money
Government
if they talked to us.
institution.
Now they can talk to us. They just had a whole symposium in the VA culture, which had to be really brain dead, you know, about how they could.
We're gonna have a veteran talk after this too, so we'll get into that. No, it's a great segue. We have Santa Cruz Veterans Alliance in the house, so we'll get right into it. So stick around.
I just had a question,
Albert.
you know,
Hey.
I
How's
really
it
don't
going?
know
Good.
anything
How
about
are you?
what you're
Good to
trying,
see
just
you.
trying to learn,
Good
but
to see you.
if, say I wanted to make my own medicine and I don't grow my own plants, how the heck would I do?
I think you have my card and your
Yes, I do. Okay, I'll start there.
You're gonna
know
find
your farmer.
Oh,
You're gonna find your farm. The most important is to know your farmer. You know, we need to get back where we go to the farmer's market and we start developing a relationship with our tomato farmer and our kale farmer and our broccoli farmer. And we need to have that same relationship with our cannabis farmer if we can't provide it ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And the farmers need support. I mean,
Absolutely.
a lot of
Farmers are
them
the
don't
ones that
have
need
an access to the market because of a lack of licensing. So if they don't get support, they're going to jump ship, sell their land, do something else. You know, we all are trying to struggle to survive in this community, and it's a beautiful place to live, but it's expensive.
I wanted to go back. We were talking about the isolates, and Jeff had come up with that. I wanted to give you the only true scientific study has done on extraction was done in the University of Turkey. So the highest extractor for all the cannabinoids was olive oil and coconut oil in a tie. The next one was ether, and ether is not allowed to be used from us regular folks, but I think the pharmaceutical companies will go that way. The next method is alcohol. Then after that, butane, hexane, propane,
Hydrocarbons.
Yes. And they do build up in your body.
Oh yeah.
So that's something to know. Then you get down to CO2, and then you'll go down to glycerin, vinegar, and eventually to water. So as you see, the easiest thing for you yourself to be able to make your own medicine is the highest extracting thing. It's the easiest. If you wanted to make comfrey root oil, it's in the same manner as you would make your cannabis oil. Now, if you wanted to make a CBDA or a THCA, I would put the flowers in oil and I'd put them out in the sun, and they would not activate, and they would say it THCA or CBDA. So it's actually in the matter that you process it, and you can convert the chemicals one to the other. And addressing the chlorophyll and it being green, you go to the health food store and you can buy chlorophyll pills because it's a superfood. It's something very important through your body. It processes through your body very well. Once you take out part of the different aspects and constituents in cannabis, you're left with a Marinol. If you take the pills, the CO2 vape pens, they're very short, dabbing tube. It's heavy in, it's very fast. It gets you high very quickly, but it dissipates it just as quickly. Where the whole plant, it takes a little longer to go through the system, but it will stay in your body 5 to 8 hours, depending on tolerance. So hopefully that answered.
We're right at the top of the hour. I do want to give our speakers some final words, and then we'll have a quick transition into our next panel. So thank you, everybody.
Oh yeah, also did want to mention one other thing. We were talking about isolates and such, but this is kind of how silly things have gotten in a way too, is people will process things and strip away all the terpenes, and then because the terpenes are now gone, now they take terpenes that came from who knows what
Orange
plant or how they were actually processed,
Sure.
and then reintroduce them back into this. So you end up with these Frankenstein mixtures But if you just stay in the whole plant realm, you never. It seems to be in perfect balance right off the bat. Did want to mention just because before came to this meeting, I was just finally getting a chance to type to our planning commission, who is now going to have some pretty heavy sway on where the local ordinance is going to be going here in Santa Cruz. And while I was writing it, just had a bunch of sort of epiphanies and the whole theme of what I was writing was actually, why won't the Santa Cruz farmers just surrender and go into South County commercial ag land to just grow there? And that's the question that I've heard some people say, hey, it's commercial ag, so just go grow it in the commercial ag areas. Which there's nothing wrong with doing that if people want to. But so if anybody's following sort of the politics and what's going on in this town, the ordinance that we're trying to come up with is, it's more than just growing a plant. It's just this whole way of life that seems to be part of the whole Santa Cruz ethos that we embrace, is the homesteader concept, that you're living off your land, you're producing something that you can share with your community here locally and such. So that's an important thing. If anyone wants to come to the Board of Supervisor meetings and the Planning Commission meetings, they're going on this week at the county building on Tuesday and Wednesday. They start at 9 a.m. And that's the best time to come for the public comments, to just let people know. Because right now there really is an effort by the county to just ban all the cultivation in the hills and just get it out of any residential type area, and just send it all to commercial ag, and so they don't have to deal with it anymore. But it's important to know it's not just also a way of life, but there have been situations, Harborside, one example in Salinas, which is one of the big, they set up a bunch of greenhouses in Salinas, and their first round of cannabis that they harvested, they found was contaminated with pesticides. And it turns out they tracked down the culprit was actually pesticide drift that had probably come from a nearby broccoli field and such. So they had the resources to then install these super fancy air filtration systems that could filter out the pesticides so they wouldn't come into their greenhouse. So that's some issues. There's residual pesticides that are also in the soil from decades of pesticide use. But then just coming back to the lifestyle of the small farmer, our farmer's market sort of way of life that we all embrace here. And the ability to, instead of jumping in a car, like a lot of these cannabis farmers live in San Lorenzo Valley or up on Summit, that would mean all of a sudden if they want to stay in the cannabis industry, they'd have to get in a car, drive all the way across the county to go to this site. And there's something really special about being able to actually produce at your home and live off the land and be interacting in this beautiful natural Santa Cruz mountain environment and produce that kind of cannabis. And that's in a way why Santa Cruz cannabis is known around the world as some of the finest cannabis. So hopefully if you talk to anyone or if you go to these meetings, if you can help get that concept to our decision makers in the county building, because yeah, it's a cultural issue as well that we're trying to preserve. So anyway,
Any last words? We're just at the top of the hour, so we'll wrap up here and look forward to our next panel.
My last words were just after sharing with you the extraction method. The reason I shared that, when you go to a dispensary now, you can ask them, how is this produced? One of the main things people are doing is they're doing alcohol extractions, and then they're adding that into coconut oil or olive oil. Well, if olive oil extracts better, why would you do that? You're getting less you're using a less extraction, you have less cannabinoids in that alcohol extraction that you would be infusing into olive oil or coconut oil. If you're doing glycerin, you might do a solvent transfer to, anyway, we'll do classes later. But do ask how your medicine is produced. If they don't know, you may not want to buy it. And infused in the marketplace now does not mean an herbal infusion of those people that are herbalists in the room. It means it's a CO2 product that they squeezed into that cookie. So infused is not whole plant. Just to let you know. Thank you so much.
The more you know. Thank you so much. We're giving ourselves a couple minutes, stretch, get your blood flowing, reconvene here in 2 minutes. Let's take a quick family photo with our panelists or speakers. And thank you, everybody. We'll be right back after 2 minutes.
Thank you, Albert. I appreciate that.
I think that's the most important.
No, it's not. Take a quick photo with you guys.
Here we go. What are you supposed to say? Cheese or Berkeley or something? What do you
Cannabis.
want?
OG. Your trees.
Great smile.
Trees. Thanks, guys.
So, is Val coming?
I love it.
Alrighty, we'll give ourselves a couple minutes, get up, stretch, walk around. We'll be back here in 2 minutes.
But I've got